It's been a minute, and I think I've got a lot of stuff to tell you guys about. Haha, yeah, that's where we're at. Right. So this gear spun on the crank, and that caused a couple problems. So this gear does two things. It drives the oil pump, and it also carries this reluctor wheel, which is what the crank position sensor reads to determine crank position. So what happened is one of these little 5mm dowel pins is used to locate this gear to the crank, to time it to the crank, and it failed. The pin sheared and the crank gear spun. And what that did is it threw the perceived crank position and cam position out of phase, and in doing so caused the computer to see an issue, shut the truck down, and stop fire to the injectors. It simultaneously means that the oil pump stopped being driven. The truck I was driving, and it shut down pretty much instantly. So I'm cautiously optimistic that there wasn't substantial oil pressure loss enough to cause a problem. However, in order to pull this gear off the crank, the oil pans have to come off because the reluctor wheel sits like a 1/16 of an inch below grade on the oil pans. And when I determined the oil pans had to come off, and I was faced with the choice of either working on a stand or working upside down on the ground, I opted for the stand. So this past weekend, had some help pulling the engine and the transmission and everything. And at this point, I'm gonna work on the red truck first, a couple things I need to do to it. But as far as this thing goes, gonna probably strip a lot of parts off it, like all the exhaust stuff, to make it a little bit less top heavy. And then we'll flip it and open up the bottom end and see what the main bearings look like, what the crank looks like. As of right now, I don't have any reason to believe that the crank is broken. I think that the issue is only what we see here. So as of right now, the plan is to get some quotes on machining keyways into the crank, which are substantially stronger than the dowel pins, and probably reuse the factory crank. In an effort to minimize the number of cooks in the kitchen, I've been keeping in contact with just one person about this project, and we talked about the pros and cons of a replacement forged crank versus reusing the factory crank. And I think for this application, the factory one's totally fine. A forged one is like $1,600, and I might get to a point and just say fuck it and do that, but I think for the time being I'm going to run with the idea of using the factory one, and we'll have some upgraded machine work to have it accept the keyways. And then from there, probably like replace the oil pump while I'm in there. I'm going to look into doing an alternate firing camshaft. But aside from that, it's pretty much going to be rinse and repeat and then reinstall in the truck. So while the engine's out, and now that I've had this thing together, albeit briefly, it's going to give me a chance to clean up some other stuff that I can't easily access with the engine in the truck. I'm going to make some changes to the pinch weld along the firewall that's going to make installing the trans a little bit more easy. And then just taking care of some loose odds and ends while the engine is out. So it's pretty shitty, obviously. I guess it's better that we're working on it now in the winter when I'd prefer not to drive the truck anyway. However, it still sucks that the engine's got to get opened back up after what appeared to be such a successful test run. So that's what's going on. And probably not going to make another video on this until we're actually working on the engine a little bit more in depth. But I figured as kind of a follow-up to where I left you guys last time, this would be a good little update. So some fun stuff coming for the red truck. And, you know, just another setback for this, but it's all good. Keep plowing ahead, and hopefully sometime in the summer of 2023, I'll be able to look back on this video and pity myself, but also have a couple laughs. So see you guys in the next one.